Shalom, welcome to another episode of Inspiration from Zion. I'm Jonathan Feldstein, and I have the privilege of being your host, coming to you from the Judean Mountains here in Israel. I like to refer to it as the original Bible Belt. Inspiration from Zion is a program of the Genesis 123 Foundation, whose mission is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. I pray that you will find this all of those. Through this program, we're excited to connect you to people and stories in and relating to Israel to give you a window to look through, experiencing aspects of life here that you might not otherwise know about. We're excited to give you this opportunity and also always want to ask you to share as we bring conversations like this to you. We also want this to be interactive, so please be in touch with us at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com and send along any questions and any comments about any topic anytime. And always, as always, please feel free to share this with others and stay tuned until the end, where we're also going to offer you an exciting opportunity. I'm excited and I'm a little bit apologetic that it's taken so long for me to have today's guest, Troy Miller, on with me, on with this conversation. It's truly been something on my mind for, wow, at least a year, probably two. Troy, you know, we have this tradition in Judaism around Yom Kippur that we're supposed to apologize for our sins. So in advance of this coming Yom Kippur, several months away, I apologize, and I hope this conversation will atone for my oversight in not having you sooner. Troy is president and CEO of the National Religious Broadcasters, the NRB. I was thinking, just leading up to the conversation, and I'm saying this somewhat tongue in cheek, but also with a degree of affection and sincerity. What Troy has done in terms of rebuilding the national religious broadcasters over the past several years is just a little bit less miraculous than the restoration of Jewish sovereignty here in Israel. He's done it with divine accompaniment, as we have here as well. And more importantly than that, Troy is an amazing guy. I guess part of the reason that I feel so bad not having had this conversation earlier is because every time I'm together with him, whether it's walking down the hall, even in the midst of thousands of people connecting at whatever hotel the NRB is going to be at, um, there's always a smile, there's always warmth, and it's sincere. And I like that. And I remembered last month when we visited, I think it was last month, maybe a month before that, when we visited at his office, I thought to myself, wow, how much I enjoy this and how much I regret not recording that conversation because it was so insightful. So here, I'm so excited to have you, Troy. I hope we can recreate a little bit of that conversation. But more importantly, wherever this goes, I have several things I want to talk to you about. I'm really glad that you're here. And I really want to honor you and everything you and all of your leadership and national religious broadcasters are doing, to give me a little bit of an opportunity to share that with my followers and listeners. Welcome.
Jonathan, thank you so much. Very kind of you. And look, the appreciation goes both ways. I enjoy every time we're together, and I walk away learning something new, something I didn't know about my Jewish brothers and sisters, or about Israel, or just about you personally. And so it's always a great time to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Troy. Troy really is. Before we go into some of the topics that are very hot and contemporary, and talk about the convention that's coming up, and want to make sure that anyone who doesn't know or hasn't yet reserved their spot that they should do so, can you just give an overview? What's the NRB?
Yeah, the NRB is the oldest organization that represents Christian communicators. It started back in 1944 when there was a group of pastors that wanted to get on radio. And even in 1944, Jonathan, there were gatekeepers out there that wanted to decide who could and who couldn't be on radio, and how much time you could be and what you could say. And so they formed the NRB at Moody Church to really fight on behalf of Christian communicators to be in the public public space, to be in the mediums, whatever they are at the times. Radio was radio in 1944, but it was radio, then television, then cable, satellite, and now, of course, all things internet and digital that are out there. So we advocate up on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. We look at legislation that's going through, regulatory environment, everything that goes through the legal system and the courts, to make sure that it's as smooth as can be for Christian communicators to participate in the public marketplace of ideas and be a player at the table. That's kind of the core of what we do. On top of that, at the NRB convention and throughout the year, we help those communicators understand where the trends are going in technology, what's changing in that regulatory environment, what do you need to do, what do you need to be on the lookout for, all of those things. Also, just where the culture is going. We deal with a number of cultural issues that are out there. And of course, support of Israel is one of those. That's one of our top priorities that we work on here. I call it, we're the megaphone for that cause. We really get out and fight anti-Semitism, and we support Israel's right to exist as a nation. I know we call it Christian Zionism. I simply call it the Jewish homeland movement, okay? It's the homeland. We fight because we have the Bible. We know what God promised Abraham, what he said to Moses, and what he told to Joshua when they crossed over for the first time into Jordan, into that land. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we do at NRB.
Amazing, thank you. And you've got your hand, you literally, your hand on the pulse of so many things. I don't know that I get all of your emails, but I get a lot of emails, and I'm really excited about that and everything that you're doing, because while I'm not a Christian broadcaster, the podcast is broadcast on the Charisma Podcast Network, which is one of the most significant Christian broadcasting networks in the United States, if not the world. And I'm always honored to have that. And we'll give a shout out to Steve Strang as well for everything that they're doing. Before we get into talking about Israel specifically, what are the hot issues that people need to be looking at this year at the NRB convention that you're going to be featuring?
Well, there's a number of things that we're going to talk about. Of course, we work very hard on the, and this administration here in the U.S. has been great on the weaponization of government that has happened in the last administration against Christians and Christianity. So that's one of the issues we'll talk about. AI is going to be a big topic from the tech side. Where is AI? How does it play? How do you use it in today's communication? How should it be used if you're a pastor out there in the pulpit today? Because there's just a lot around AI. Plus, there's a lot of protections that we need to do. AI can create a lot of false information, create a lot of propaganda. It can do a lot of good things and bad things. So AI, we're going to have a whole AI stage. We're going to talk about all of those artificial intelligence kind of issues that were going on around the world. Christian persecution and right along with it, the fight of anti-Semitism is going to be a main topic for us. We're going to be addressing that because both of those are on the rise around the globe right now. And so that's a big topic that we'll do. And again, we have an exhibit floor that's going to have over 260 different organizations that'll be displaying and helping people with everything from services to ministries that are out there. So I think we're over 70,000 square feet. And we're going to do a big celebration for America's 250 anniversary birthday and talk about our Judeo-Christian foundation that was behind the revolution of this country.
If you're doing a celebration, is there going to be a cake? And if there's going to be a cake, will it be kosher?
Oh, yeah. A big kosher cake on Thursday night.
I was real disappointed when I was at Billy Graham's 90th birthday party, and I learned that the tables were all set. Were you there? I don't know if were you there at that?
No, I was not.
The table, I guess I'm bragging, but okay. The tables were all set, and there was a slice of red velvet cake in front of everybody, which was his favorite cake, apparently. And I was disappointed because I love a good cake, and it wasn't kosher. So I have to buy Duncan Hines if I want good red velvet cake. But anyway, so I don't forget, because sometimes I get so engrossed in conversations, and I do that with you. Where can people go to learn more about NRB and specifically register to join the conference that's coming up in Nashville?
Yeah, the conference, like you said, it'll be in Nashville, February 17th through the 20th. You can go to nrbconvention.org, and that'll tell you everything that's going on in the conference, all the sessions, the over 170 different speakers that'll be covering all the topics that we'll do. So it's nrbconvention.org. And then you can go to nrb.org to find all the issues that we're tracking and working on. You can find the latest articles we have, what's going on in the culture. So for all things NRB, it's nrb.org. And for the convention, it's nrbconvention.org.
Amazing. Now, I don't know how many years, but I think it's at least 15 years that I've been coming to NRB. And except for COVID, when I was hard to fly out of here, I've been attending every single one. I've always been a strong, and this was before it was popular to see Orthodox Jews from Israel coming to NRB. And now it's a lot. I mean, I sort of get mixed in with the crowd, which is also great because I've been a strong advocate of not just building bridges, but I think that, albeit that Jewish communicators have less of a presence in the United States and around the world than Christians, I think that there's a whole lot of overlap. What have you seen in your tenure in terms of the dynamic of Jews and Jewish communicators and the organizations that are showing up um, that are part of the process of communication? What have you seen, and how's that
Yeah,
evolved?
Yeah, and that's been a real target of mine because prior to me coming on board, I've been around NRB myself for about 25 years, plus as a member and an attendee, and then for the last 5 years as the leader of this organization. And one of the things NRB, rightly so, was really focused on was a lot of the tourism, right? Get your churches, get your pastors, come visit the Holy Land, see where Jesus walked, the apostles walked, go see where the patriarchs lived, and all the different things that happened there, and that was great. That was a excuse me, that was great. That was a good cause. But I really kind of started even prior to October 7th, 2023, really started to dive into how do we build just stronger relationships between the two communities that were kind of moved beyond this, either looking at Israel. What I say, Christians either looked at Israel from a historical standpoint and looked at, as we talked about, all of the history that's within Israel for both communities, or looking at Israel from a future standpoint, because let's face it, a lot of Christians look at the future of Israel and that drives their involvement with today. I really look at today. I really hold the verse that God gave us such a time as this, the time that we live, the time that God gave us to be a part of and to influence and to change for the better. God's given us only so much time on this planet. So how do we make the best at that time in this time? So meeting and knowing people, Jonathan, like you, and meeting all of the other Orthodox rabbis that I've met that have become very close and dear friends, meeting folks that work in different NGO organizations over there. And then, of course, after October 7th, just meeting people in the communities and understanding what people went through. I've really worked hard to expand NRB's involvement with Israel beyond tourism, just beyond that kind of tourist aspect, to build closer ties and relationships, because I think the two communities, look, biblically, I believe the two communities are tied together, and so we should be marching in lockstep in the time that we live in now.
Right? No, it's funny, and I gave you when I was with you. Do you have it there? The last bottle of anointing oil
Yeah,
that I
it's
had in my
actually
pocket. But the point being, it's from our program, Root and Branch. You know, my friend and partner for our Root and Branch program, bringing Christians to harvest olives in the land, and now we're making
right.
anointing oil to begin to sell it. But for me, the metaphor of everything you just said is the verse in Romans, where forgive me, you're the Christian expert. I'm just a Christian friend.
Romans 11, yeah, where Paul talks about us as Christians being grafted in to, he says it, the cultivated olive tree, which is Israel, and that we have been grafted into the cultivated. We, the wild olive branches, have been grafted into the cultivated olive tree.
So listen, I know we're going to come to it. I don't want to get to it quite yet. I know you're going to be here in the fall during the olive harvest. I really have to find a day for you to at least a day or at least half a day to grab one of the rakes and come and harvest those olives with us, Troy. It's so
Love to do
remarkable.
it.
Okay, great. I'm curious, and maybe it's not a fair question and you can answer it as you will, but it has been an evolution in the last several years of NRB being all about tourism, and every tour company was trying to grab the pastors and broadcasters to see who they can service and bring the groups for, and hopefully that will be restored. And we're not mitigating tourism. Tourism is tremendously important for Israel, but also for Christians. Have you gotten pushback as the advocacy for Israel, the place of Israel in NRB has become that much more visible?
You know, not really. I think more so it's been welcomed at NRB. I think our community really helped our community kind of maybe themselves come a little bit out of the shadows in their support for
Wow,
Israel
wow.
that's out there. I mean, there's always some naysayers out there. We deal that in both communities, right? You deal that with your community about getting closer involved with Christians and working with Christians, and you know we always have some of that. But for the most part, Jonathan, it's been very accepted, and it's actually helped grow and bring more Christian organizations into the NRB that have come back and want to be a part of this. So we're just going to continue to work that and build on that, because I just feel like that's what God would want us to do, to have that kind of unity.
I love that answer because it's a bookend now of something that you alluded to, which is the combating anti-Semitism. Very important. I always say to people, and maybe we discussed it when I was with you at your office, that I don't believe we're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism. I believe we're seeing a rise in the permissiveness of anti-Semitism,
Mm.
and that means it's always been under the surface. It is there. It's not gone away, and that makes combating it very hard because I'm not sure that it will go away. It goes back to Abraham. It's satanic, and maybe for that reason, it's always going to be a conflict. But what you just said is that the allowing of Christians to express themselves, express their support for Israel, express themselves as Zionists, was also under the surface. And by opening up a wider relationship with Israel and the Jewish people, you're also allowing that, which is such an important bookend for the thing that's the opposite that we're fighting. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's very well said. I think that's right. I think, look, we know that I think there's a permissiveness. I think it's really deeper than that. There's been such an ideological change in the way, especially the younger generations think, and how they approach the world. You know, they don't really approach the world today because they approach it from such a secular point of
Uh,
view. And we know that the world, especially over the last couple of decades, that secular worldview has been heavily influenced by a lot of socialist kinds of thinking and
yeah,
you know, permissive. So it's like the world has, they boil it down into this whole issue of there's the oppressors and the colonizers and the people that are, you know, the problem in this world, and then there's all the victims, you know. And I think it's that mentality that has really, we've seen the growth, not in as you said, the permissiveness of anti-Semitism, but also of Christian persecution. Both of those
yes.
go
Thank you for
hand
mentioning
in.
that.
both of those go really hand in hand. And I see it as as you said, for Christians, I see it as a spiritual warfare, because Satan has hated God's people from the beginning. Even the teachings of Christ tell us that he views himself as the prince of this world. So the last thing he wants to see are people who are following God, right? The people who are following the Judeo-Christian teaching and the morals and the values that we find in those scriptures. And so there's this warfare. And what better way to attack Christianity than to attack the root, to attack Judaism, to attack the foundation of this. And I think we've lost that worldview, that kind of worldview amongst the young adults. And I'm going to speak about the church, that kind of worldview that's been lost amongst young adults in the church, because there's been a long time disconnect in a lot of young pastors teaching on what we call the Old Testament and what you call the Bible, right? There's been a disconnect in the Christian church on that. So that you take that and you connect it with this socialism movement and this rise of oppressors and victims. And now that's what the source, in my mind, the root of this permissiveness of anti-Zionism that's gone around the world. And then this root of Christian persecution. Over 1,000 churches in Europe have been arson attacks across
Really?
Europe. And you go to that root of that, and then you toss on top of that a radical Islamic movement, and
Yes.
you have a real formula for discord in the world.
So I'm so glad you brought it up, because it's something, and maybe I didn't share this with you either. I think I did. That I can't remember how many years ago. I think in 22 there were massive floods in Pakistan, leaving millions of people killed and infected, and Christians in Pakistan are always the low man on the totem pole, persecuted in ways that are unspeakable. And over the years, because of what I do, and my focus is not only on Nashville, where the NRB convention is, but the global church. I've developed a number of friends in Pakistan who are Christian.
Mhm.
And I decided, based on what they were telling me and the suffering that they were enduring, not just post flood, but with the persecution from radical Muslims. And that, I mean, maybe one can define Pakistan and radical Muslims as being one and the same. I wouldn't have a hard time making that argument. We ran a fundraising campaign to help Christians in Pakistan. And I'm so happy. I'm the only Orthodox Jew you know or probably will ever meet who's ever done something like that. And I'm real proud of it. But I was real disappointed because a million Christians didn't step up and give $10. Why? I didn't understand. And what I've learned, and maybe this goes, we're the older brother, but you're the bigger brother. And and one of the things that I have observed over the years doing what I do is that Christians aren't tribal like Jews. So it's critical that you talk about persecution of Christians. Burning a thousand churches in Europe, I didn't know that. We know that Christians are persecuted across the Arab and Islamic world. We also know that it's very common and tremendous in Nigeria, which is in the spotlight at the moment, but certainly not the only place in Africa. And I find, and maybe this is something that you and I, for sure, I'd love to collaborate with anything that you do, but Jews and Christians together, because I think too many people in the church don't look at the church as being global, and don't look at the
Mhm.
analogy that if you poke someone over here, it has a ripple effect that should be responded to. I'm so glad that you're doing it. And we spoke about it when we were in your office about making that a big priority at the upcoming convention and in general. And that's important. But I think that Christians are missing that tribal thing that we have. Shakespeare wrote about it, in I think in The Merchant of Venice, in a different capacity. But if you cut us, do we not bleed? But that's the thing, is if you cut us in the Gaza border, we're bleeding in Nashville and in New York. And if you're persecuting us in Nashville and New York, we're feeling it here as well. Maybe that's something that can come out of this. But I'm glad that you mentioned it. Again, I love the conversation, and I love that people are listening to our conversation because there's a lot to glean from it. I'm curious, something else that you alluded to. We're talking about October 7th, and I always talk about what that is. I don't think that people necessarily know that October 7th was that day that Hamas sponsored terrorists who were fueled by Iran and Qatar committed this mass atrocity that we've never seen before here in the state of Israel on one day. We live with it. But I also think, and you mentioned TikTok and other means of communication, and that's your sweet spot as NRB. There's we've been talking about the seven front war that Israel's physically fighting, but the eighth front is that communication, is the eighth front is the media. And I'm wondering, over the years, the last 2 years, if you have any assessment of how your members, Christian communicators, have have been challenged by the media war on Israel. And unless you're as knowledgeable as Troy Miller, unless you're as knowledgeable as Stephen Strang, unless you're as knowledgeable as David Santrella, unless you're as knowledgeable, and I have to mention her, is this the first year since she died? Kay Arthur was.
Second, yeah.
Wow, and it's hard to think of her in the past tense because her presence was so great. If you're not, wow, I'm just sad right now. If you're not as knowledgeable as you collectively, it's hard to properly represent Israel. How have you come across that in terms of your day-to-day work with all of these people?
Well, I think a couple of things there. So after October 7th, happened, I went with one of the first groups on what we called a fact-finding and solidarity trip. I mean, we were there in December of 2023. I mean, we were just barely 2 months after the incident happened. We visited the South, and the reason to do that was because we knew that the mainstream media wasn't going to take this message to the American population and particularly to the American church that was out there. We knew that the real message of what happened that day wasn't going to get there. So a group of us media leaders, we came over, we brought that message back. I really think, Jonathan, that the church has stepped up. The Christian communicators have really stepped up to fill in the gap where the mainstream media is not. The mainstream media still today, talks about October 7th as if it was somehow Israel's fault. There's always a slant to it. There's never just the right reporting. There's always as I say, a propaganda element into that reporting in there. But the church, look, Jack Hibbs, one of the great pastors out of
Yeah,
California, he right away that first year he put together a network of churches and had over 1,000 churches praying for Israel and praying for the IDF soldiers and praying for wisdom for Israel in the war. And so it was a little bit of an uphill battle because, like you said, a lot of churches, their whole focus and Christian communicators' focus was on come visit Israel. But now
yeah,
that focus really changed. And I am proud to say we didn't have any resistance. We started to put out media alerts on what was going on. And we started to send out information when we saw something that was misrepresented in the mainstream media. And look, we didn't have a single one of our 1,000 communicators plus who wrote us back and said, quit sending us these. All of them just really wanted that information. They
thank
wanted
God.
it
Wow.
for their own talk shows, for their own podcast, for their own news alerts. and so all of those things are there. But it really did take an effort to kind of get that to change in the Christian media that was there. Now I think we have a kind of a second wave of that. How do we build on that? And we have a lot of work to restore that foundational teaching between Christianity and Judaism. What are the common points? What is, we have to remember sometimes as Christians, when Jesus walked this earth, this is Jesus of Nazareth, who we consider the Savior, right? We consider the Messiah. When Jesus walked this earth, he walked it as a Jewish citizen and a Jewish religious observer.
Yeah.
The scriptures that he quoted from are the Jewish scriptures. None of the New Testament writings had existed at this point. And by the way, all of those New Testament writers were the same kind of people. They were the same people.
Yes.
And they were always reflecting back. And so, and I just say this for people, one of the things I enjoy, Jonathan, about you, enjoy it as some of my other Orthodox rabbis, is for me, the more I learn about the real meanings and the real faith that's held in the Jewish community, the more the New Testament always comes alive to me. The more I understand it, the more it's alive. And so there's that connection that we have to help the young adults that I think, and there's a lot of areas of this in the church, but we have to help the young adults get connected with it that we just took for granted. And we can't take anything for granted in the world we live in today.
Right. Wow. Okay. Excellent. And going to a point that you said earlier, which I have to rewind and not just listen to, but I have some notes on my wall in front of my desk, and yours is a quote that needs to go up there, and I can't rephrase it, but referencing in terms of that we don't know how much time that we've got, so we need to make it all purposeful. That's something I learned when my father died as a young man. And now I've outlived my father, thank God. And but I don't know how much time I've got, so every day's got to count. And you just said it again in the same way. Let's Troy move over. Now we're having this conversation on the 21st of January. The video link will be up shortly. The audio maybe a week or two because I've got to slate a bunch of things in, and they only come out weekly. But this week, earlier in the week, the patriarchs and heads of churches, patriarchs and head of the churches in Jerusalem issued a statement, which is entitled "A Statement." Clever name, a statement from the patriarchs and heads of churches in Jerusalem on unity and representation of the Christian communities in the Holy Land. This was on January 17th. If anyone wants that statement, please be in touch with me at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com, and I'll share that, and I'll share the article that I've written about it. And if people are able to contact me or want to see the video that we're doing of the webinar tomorrow, to please be in touch. But I don't want to get into editorializing and my thoughts on that statement. I know you've read it. I know you've got your thoughts, I don't know, personal or on behalf of NRB, if NRB's released a statement specifically. But I'm wondering if you can help unpack that and share why it's become so controversial.
Well, I think it's controversial for a number of reasons. The first and foremost as this body representing itself as the only, authoritative group who can speak on behalf of the universal church. That's there when we have a large, and I can speak for ours because most of our members of the church are evangelical churches across this country. We have a large evangelical church population in America and around the world who certainly would consider the patriarchs and them brothers and sisters in Christ but not authoritative to speak on behalf of the entire
Wow.
church or to speak
Well
on
said.
behalf of the evangelical church. So that I think is the first piece that we have to address, and then and deeper sort of into the letter, into the statement that they've made, this kind of statement on a rejection of Zionism,
Christian Zionism.
Christian Zionism in particular. Again, I think it's a statement that the vast majority of our members and the community here in church in the U.S. Would reject that statement.
Yeah, it's almost
And
like poking you in the eye directly, because I have it in front of me. They say, I have an issue, and maybe I will editorialize for a moment. The letter refers to local individuals who advance damaging ideologies, plural, such as Christian Zionism, but Christian Zionism is the only quote unquote damaging ideology that's that's referenced, and they
that's
say,
mentioned.
right? And then they say those people and the ideology mislead the public, sow confusion, and harm the unity of our flock. That's pretty damning.
Which I could sort of turn around and say this letter did exactly that same thing to the evangelical community. It was misleading, it was harming the flock, and it was damaging. Because again, and people have to understand, and Jonathan, you understand this probably better than I do. There are a lot of politics within the different communities in Israel, as there are within any country. There's politics with different communities and who they support and the kind of policies they support in there. But look, as an evangelical leader here in the U.S., representing a lot of evangelical churches and communicators, that's just a letter that we would that we say that's just something we don't sign on to. That is not the stance and the opinion that's held here in the U.S. By the vast majority of Christians and Christian churches here. And as I said earlier, it's really interesting to understand because a lot of them view themselves as protecting a lot of the Christian holy sites, there in the homeland in Israel. But the root of that is the Jewish homeland. It runs to the root of the Jewish homeland. You can't get past the promises that God made to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to Moses, the direction he gave to Joshua. One of the things I do here when I teach sometimes, I pull up the modern day footprint of Israel, right? And I put that up on a slide. And then like a lithograph, I sort of lay over the top of it. I say, in the back of your Bibles, here's a map of how the 12 tribes were divided up, with the 2 tribes of Manasseh, how they were divided up. Much larger footprint than that Israel has today.
Correct.
Much larger footprint that God gave them today. And then I jump back up into Romans again and tell everybody the promises of God, Paul said, are irrevocable. And so you can't have this sort of view of what is Zionism. I think that gets back to the heart of it. It doesn't mean that we support every policy of the Israeli government. I don't support every policy.
I don't. I'm an Israeli. I don't.
I don't support every policy of the U.S. government that goes on here. But what it means at the core for Christians, what Zionism means, I think this is so important for us to define. What it means at the core of Christians is that we recognize the biblical mandate for a homeland for the Jewish people. That's what we recognize, and that's what we support, and that's what it means to be a Christian Zionist.
And in the land of Israel, not in Uganda.
Right. Look, the biblical land. We know the mandate where God told Abraham to get up and go to, where God told Joshua to move out of the desert into, where he partitioned all of those 12 tribes. We know that out of all of this earth, the creator of this earth and the universe designated that piece of land, that property, to the Jewish people. That's the
So wait, I have to ask you a question. Help me.
that's the biblical man. That's what it means to be a Christian Zionist.
So maybe it's also not a fair question, but help me understand something. Because I understand the concept of replacement theology, and there to put it politely, there are definitely undertones of replacement theology in this letter. But do do the authors of this letter, who sign it, the patriarchs and heads of churches in Jerusalem, do they not understand? Do they disagree with God's promises to Israel vis-a-vis the land of Israel?
You know, I of course I can't get into behind their intent. I can infer that. I can
Okay.
infer, but I also can infer that what I read into there is a lot of politics. I
Okay.
don't read a lot of theology into that and behind that. I read a group that's claiming to be the spokespeople of the church on behalf of the church, and so what I read into that letter is a lot of power politics that go on, and not necessarily a whole lot of deep theology. There's not a lot of doctrine and teaching. They didn't really back up us to say why they're, first of all, the patriarchs are the spokespeople for the church, what gave them that right, who gave them that right. I guarantee there's probably a guy in Rome that disagrees with them on
Wow.
that.
Wow.
And a lot of evangelicals, Protestants across this world who would disagree with them on that. But I think we have to realize that when we read these things, there's politics behind that. And I think what people keep tying into here, which is not, I've never heard this across all the Christian community and people I've talked to. Nobody looks at Zionism as a carte blanche, 100% support of the Israeli government and politics that go on in Israel. I've never heard that in a church. I've never heard that. Matter of fact, most of them want to avoid the politics that go on, don't even understand the politics that go on in Israel. What they are supporting, and that's where I think when they talk Christian Zionism, their version of Zionism is the Israeli government and the politics of the Israeli government and foreign policy and domestic policy. That's not Christian Zionism to Christians. Christian Zionism is we agree and stand by the right of the Jewish people to have the homeland that God gave them.
Thank you for that, Troy. I want to begin to wrap up. I alluded to it before, talking about your plans to be in Israel and join us in the fall picking olives, but you have other big plans coming up. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we are going to hold this fall in November of 2026 a Christian Media Summit. And it's a joint summit. It's going to be a global summit. We're inviting people from all around the world in the media space, the news space. So we're looking for people that are in news, information, and influencers on the news side to come in and create a joint summit to create partnerships between Jewish media organizations, I said, from around the globe to combat and to fight the two major issues that we have together. And that's Christian persecution and anti-Semitism. Christian hate and Jewish hate are
Wow.
tied together. They are tied together. And so we have to lock arms to fight this on a global basis. You know, we were there for a similar conference last November, and the deputy, I believe her title is Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell, you know, talked about October 7th, and we so appreciated, you know, what she talked about and what it meant from a Jewish perspective. But then she made the comment that is so true that we have to remember. There are Christian communities around the world that are experiencing an October 7th almost every day. with attacks and rapes and murders, particularly in Nigeria right now.
Yeah.
Northern Nigeria is a terrible state. There were just this weekend, there were more villages that were attacked. There were over 30 Christians that were murdered. There were another 50 plus that were kidnapped. And so this fight is a fight together, Jonathan, that we need to work on. And we're trying to bring the media sources so that the truth in the media will get out, and more people are depending upon independent media sources than they are mainstream media sources. And so that's our focus of getting together in Jerusalem.
Wow. Okay. So that's amazing. I'll tell you a little secret. We're scheduling our Root and Branch Olive Harvest program before, so there's no conflict. And so both myself and Marzi Amirizadeh, who needs to be part of your program as a Iranian Christian who spent 9 months on death row because she became a Christian in Iran. But yeah, that's real important. And I want to, I've got some people who we talked about this when I was in your office, but um, to recommend to be part of that because it's real important. And I'm so glad that you're linking the persecution of Jews and persecution of Christians together because we are on the whether it's opposite sides of the same coin or the same side doesn't matter. We're fighting the same battle and we need to be lockstep together on that. Troy, before we finish, I always like to give my best guests the last word. What have we talked about that we didn't talk about enough, or more significantly, what have we not talked about? Whether it's relating to Israel and Jewish people or NRB or anything else that you want to put out there for people to listen to.
I think that one of the things I think we have to recognize is that we live in a very ever-changing world today, and it seems like the more secular the world becomes, the more dangerous the world becomes. Particularly when the secular views, hold a godless, philosophy behind them, because I feel like both of our communities, God put to be that shining light, to be a beacon, to point to God, to focus on human flourishing, to focus on what it means for humanity to advance. And that both of us are really under a spiritual warfare, and the world needs that kind of message to come together. The world needs hope. The world needs to see, and desperately, I think, wants hope and wants peace and wants to have meaning in this world. The whole idea of looking back and focusing on Jerusalem, the eternal city, the temple, all of that we believe is embodied in Jesus of Nazareth, is the idea that there's something bigger and beyond us. And that's a message that we need to carry to this world. Jonathan, I think it's a message that the world is desperately, desperately looking for.
And I just want to amplify something because you said it, but when you say we, first person plural, you're not talking about we exclusive Christians. You're talking about Jews and Christians together, and
I'm
that's real
talking
important.
about we, Jews and Christians.
I love that, Troy. Thank you. Last time again, so people who are listening, where can people find out about NRB and the NRB convention?
Yep, go to nrb.org and you can find out about all these issues. You can see all of our different social media handles. You can track all the things from NRB CEO and our accounts there, or NRB convention, and you can find out all about the convention. And again, the convention is not just for media professionals, it's for anybody who wants to be a better communicator, even on your own social media platforms.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, just running the Genesis 123 Foundation, I'm glad you mentioned AI frequently because my problem at NRB is that before I've gotten there, my schedule is so full. And then for all of the people who I've missed, I can't do anything about it, but that's actually something that I want to block out time and at least that be one of the few sessions that I might be able to attend. So I highly recommend it. And anyone who's following, anyone listening, if you want to see me in the US in February, catch me in Nashville from the 6th. I'll be there the 16th until the through the 19th. So I'm looking forward to that. Troy Miller, President and CEO of National Religious Broadcasters. It's really a delight. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're super busy. The more it gets closer to actually me being in Nashville and everyone else descending on Nashville. Thanks for making the time today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I always want to end. We always have to end and thank our sponsors, specifically the Willow Run Greenhouse in Culpeper, Virginia. I don't know if there are any Christian broadcasters near Culpeper, but if you're ever in the area, please pop in and thank them for helping make conversations like this possible. And also, special thanks to our friends, the Coin family, as well, for their meaningful sponsorship. Inspiration from Zion and all Genesis 123 Foundation programs are made possible by donations. So please consider joining us to help continue the dialogue and build bridges. And based on other current events that are going on today as we speak, and hopefully by the time you're hearing this will be resolved supernaturally, we want to sponsor this episode in honor of the tremendously brave Iranian people who are taking to the streets, who are experiencing suffering that nobody should have to, certainly from their own the own leaders of their country. Hopefully, by the time people are following this, they will no longer be the leaders and they will be brought to justice. If you would like to sponsor a future episode in honor or memory of a loved one or special occasion, or your favorite revolutionary group who are taking to the streets, please be in touch at inspiration from Zion at gmail.com. We'd always love to hear your comments as well as part of a dialogue and invite you to send any questions, especially questions about traditional Judaism for our Ask the Rabbi program. Please share this with others who will also find it of interest and continue to join us right here where we bring you more meaningful conversations about unique topics relating to Israel that you won't hear anywhere else. Wherever you are in the world, I pray that you and your loved ones are all safe and healthy, and I send my blessings from right here in the Judean mountains. God bless you.